The night it happened, I was doing something completely ordinary. I was watching the tail end of a true crime documentary I'd already seen twice, the kind of show where you already know the ending, but you watch it anyway because it fills the silence. My husband passed 4 years ago, and some nights the house just gets too quiet. I had a cup of chamomile tea on the side table, half cold already, and I was thinking about whether I needed to call the exterminator again, because I'd seen something near the garage that morning. That's where I was in my life at that moment. Tea, exterminator, a TV show I'd already seen. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look at it. It was nearly 10:30, and I figured it was one of those spam texts about my car's extended warranty. But something made me pick it up. Maybe I'll spend the rest of my life trying to figure out what that something was. The text was from an unknown number. "Grandma, it's me. Please come. Daddy's friend is here's. Me Addie's friend is here. And he scares me. I don't know where Daddy went. Please." I sat there for about 3 seconds, just staring at it. My mind went through all the rational explanations. Wrong number, some kind of scam, a child who texted the wrong contact. But there was something about the lowercase letters, the no punctuation, the way it read like a child who was trying very hard to be quiet while typing, and I felt something drop in my chest. I texted back, "Who is this, sweetheart?" The response came in less than a minute. "It's Ren. Please don't tell him I'm texting you." Ren, my son Patrick's daughter. 8 years old. She was supposed to be at Patrick's apartment for the week. It was his custody week, the arrangement they'd had since the divorce 2 years ago. Her mother, my daughter-in-law Sloane, had dropped her off Sunday afternoon. I knew because Sloane had called me afterward the way she sometimes did, just to talk, just to have another adult to talk to. I called Ren's number back immediately. No answer. I called it again. Nothing. I called Patrick. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I was already standing up, already looking for my keys. I want to be clear about something. I'm 63 years old. I have a bad left knee from a fall I took hiking in my 50s, and my doctor has been after me about my blood pressure for 2 years. I am not a person who moves fast. I have never in my adult life considered myself someone who acts first and thinks second. But I had my shoes on and my purse over my shoulder before I even consciously decided to leave. Patrick's apartment was 22 minutes from my house on a good night. I made it in 15. I called Sloane while I drove. She picked up on the second ring, her voice already that particular tone of someone who'd been half awake. "It's me," I said. "Don't panic. When did you last hear from Patrick today?" There was a pause. "This morning, he texted me that he'd picked Ren up from school." "Why? What's going on?" "Ren texted me. She says there's a man at the apartment and she doesn't know where Patrick is. I'm almost there." I heard the sound of Sloane getting out of bed. "I'm coming. Call 911, I told her. Give them the address. Tell them a child is alone with an unknown adult." "Oh, God. Okay, I'm calling." I pulled onto Patrick's street and parked crookedly against the curb. His apartment was on the second floor of a building that tried to look nicer than it was. Brick facade, some potted plants by the entrance that were mostly dead. There were lights on in his windows. I buzzed his unit from the front door panel. Nothing. I buzzed again. Nothing. I buzzed again. A young man was coming out of the building right then, earbuds in, barely glancing at me, and I caught the door before it swung shut. I know there are people who would say that was wrong of me. I don't care. I took the stairs because the elevator in that building is slow and I couldn't stand still. When I reached his door, I knocked. "Patrick? It's Mum. Open up." Silence. I knocked harder. "Patrick, I need you to open this door right now." Then I heard it. A small sound, barely anything. Like someone trying not to make a sound and failing just slightly. It was coming from the other side of the door. "Ren," I said quieter. "Baby, it's Grandma. Can you get to the door?" A pause. Then, in a voice so small I had to press my ear against the wood. He told me not to open it for anyone. Who told you that? Daddy's friend. He said Daddy would be back soon and I had to stay on the couch. I closed my eyes for 1 second. Where is Daddy's friend right now? He went in Daddy's room. I think he's sleeping. Okay, I said. Can you unlock the door very quietly? Don't turn on any lights. Can you do that for me? A long pause. Then I heard the chain slide. The deadbolt clicked. The door opened about 3 inches, and I saw one eye, dark and wide, looking up at me. I got the door open, and I had her in my arms before I fully processed what I was seeing. She was in her school clothes, still, khakis and a purple top. Even though it was nearly 11 at night, she hadn't eaten dinner. She told me this in a whisper, her face pressed against my shoulder, that she'd asked the man if she could have something to eat and he'd told her to wait. I looked down the hallway toward Patrick's bedroom. The door was half closed. I could hear something, music or a TV, low. I picked up Ren and I walked out of that apartment. I didn't look back. I carried her down the stairs and out the front door, and I sat on the low brick wall outside with her in my lap, her arms around my neck, both of us just breathing. The police arrived 7 minutes later. Sloane arrived 2 minutes after that. What they found inside was not what I'd feared, exactly, but it wasn't nothing either. The man in Patrick's bedroom was someone named Ray. I only know this because the officers told me afterward. A person Patrick apparently knew from somewhere, Sloane and I didn't know about. He was unresponsive when they found him. Not from violence, but from something the officers were tactful about describing. They called an ambulance. He was alive. Patrick came home at 12:40 in the morning to find a police officer waiting for him in the hallway outside his own door. I was still outside with Ren when he arrived. She was asleep against me by then, finally her weight heavy and warm. I watched my son walk toward me across the parking lot. He was 31 years old, and he looked like a teenager who'd been caught, shoulders hunched, eyes not meeting mine. He started to say something. I held up my hand. Not right now, I said, not in front of her. He sat down on the wall about 4 feet away from me and put his face in his hands. That night, Sloane took Ren home. I hugged my granddaughter for a long time at the car door, and she whispered that she was glad I came. I told her I would always come. I meant it the way you mean things when you say them to a child in the dark, completely, without reservation, as a simple fact of the universe. Then I drove home and sat in my kitchen until 4 in the morning because I couldn't sleep and I didn't know what to do with everything I was feeling. The next 2 weeks were the kind that age you. I want to be honest about that. Patrick admitted to me eventually that he'd been struggling for about 8 months. It had started with back pain, a legitimate injury from a fall at work, and prescription medication, and then it had become something else. He said he'd had it under control. He said he hadn't known Ray was going to be like that. He said a lot of things that were probably all true in the way that partial truths are true, accurate in their details and dishonest in their totality. I listened to all of it. I sat at his kitchen table, which still had Ren's drawings on the refrigerator, and I listened. Then I said, "You left your 8-year-old daughter alone with a man you barely know so you could go out. That is what happened. All the rest of it is explanation." He didn't say anything to that. Sloane had already spoken to her attorney before I talked to Patrick. I can't blame her for that. She's a good mother and she was scared. The attorney had advised her to seek a temporary modification to the custody arrangement, which meant Patrick's parenting time would be suspended pending an evaluation. It also meant that for the immediate future, Ren would be with Sloane full-time. I agreed with this. But there was a problem. Sloane works as a hospital administrator. The hours are not predictable. She has no family in the area. Her parents are in Arizona and her sister is in Portland. Her support network for childcare is thin on good weeks, and this was not a good week. Ren had nightmares the first few nights after coming home. She didn't want to be left alone in any room. She'd wake up at 2 in the morning asking for water, just to make sure someone was there. Sloane called me on a Wednesday evening, and I could hear how exhausted she was. "I don't want to ask you this," she said. "Ask me," I said. "Could you take her? Just for a few weeks, just until the evaluation is done and we know what we're dealing with. I'll cover all her expenses. I'm not asking you to." "Sloane," I said, "stop. Of course I'll take her. I want to tell you something about Wren that I'm not sure I've adequately explained yet. She's a quiet child. Not shy exactly. She'll talk your ear off if she trusts you, but she observes things before she speaks. She takes in the room first. She has her father's eyes, this particular shade of grey-green, and when she looks at you, she seems to be listening to something beyond what you're saying. I've loved her since the moment I first held her, but in those weeks she was with me, I came to know her in a completely different way. She slept in my guest room, which I decorated years ago in shades of blue because I liked it. She told me it looked like the inside of an aquarium, and she meant this as a compliment. She started leaving small things on my bedside table. A smooth rock she found in the backyard, a note that said good morning in her handwriting, once a drawing of the two of us standing outside my house. I still have all of them in a small dish on my dresser. She was sleeping better by the second week. The nightmares tapered off. She started asking if we could watch cooking shows together after dinner, which we did. She had opinions about technique. She had opinions about everything, actually. And once she felt safe, she didn't hold them back. But she asked about her father. She asked carefully, the way children ask things when they've learned that adults sometimes lie to protect them, and they're trying to find the truth anyway. "Is Daddy sick?" she said one night. We were doing a jigsaw puzzle, which is a thing we both like because it lets you talk without looking directly at each other. "Yes," I said. "He has a kind of sickness that makes it hard for him to make good decisions sometimes. Like his brain doesn't work right. More like his brain gets confused about what it needs, and it tricks him." She was quiet for a moment. "Does he want to get better?" That was the question, wasn't it? "I think he does," I said carefully. "I think he wants to. That's the first step." She put a piece of the puzzle in place. Did he know he was leaving me with a bad person? I thought about how to answer that for a long time. "I don't think he knew how bad it was," I said finally. "But I think part of him knew it wasn't okay, and he did it anyway, and that was wrong." She nodded like she'd already worked this out herself and just needed to hear someone else say it. "You came when I texted," she said. "I will always come when you text," I said. "Even at night, especially at night." She picked up another puzzle piece and examined it. "Daddy has your eyes," she said. "Not the color, but the way they look when you're worried." I had to look away for a moment. I found a piece of the border and clicked it into place. Meanwhile, Patrick had voluntarily entered an outpatient program. I'll give him that. He didn't wait to be forced. His attorney told him it would matter in the evaluation, and I believe Patrick also did it because some part of him was genuinely frightened by what had happened. He called me 3 times that first week from the program. The first 2 calls were hard. He was angry and sorry at the same time, and those 2 things were fighting with each other. The third call was different. He just said, "Mom, I'm trying. I need you to know I'm trying." I told him I knew. I told him I was proud of the trying. I also told him that my job right now was Wren, and he said he understood that. The custody evaluation took 6 weeks. A psychologist interviewed Patrick, interviewed Sloane, interviewed Wren in a child-appropriate setting, and reviewed the police report from that night. She also, as part of her process, conducted a brief consultation with me, since Wren had been in my care. The evaluator was a woman named Dr. Ma Nguyen, and she asked me very direct questions in a way I appreciated. She asked me what I'd observed about Wren's emotional state. She asked me whether I'd seen signs of ongoing fear or just situational distress. She asked me about my relationship with Patrick. She asked, "Do you believe your son is a danger to his daughter?" I thought about this for a long time. Not by intent, I said, but intent isn't protection. What I believe is that right now, without ongoing support and accountability, the risk is too high. She wrote something down. And long term? I think he can be a good father, I said. I've seen him be one. But he has to earn that back, and the earning has to be real, not just appearances. The recommendation came down 3 weeks later. Patrick would have supervised visitation for 6 months, in person, 2 hours per week at a designated family services centre. He would complete the outpatient program and then transition to a regular support group. There would be random drug testing. After 6 months, they would reevaluate. He called me when he got the news. I expected him to be upset. Instead, he just said, "That's fair." And I thought, maybe there's something to work with there. The supervised visits started on a Tuesday in March. Sloane dropped Ren off, and I met Patrick in the waiting area of the family services building, which smells like carpet cleaner and has motivational posters on the walls. He looked thinner than he'd been. He was wearing a button-down shirt, and he'd gotten a haircut. He was nervous in a way that made him look very young. Ren came in holding Sloane's hand, and she stopped when she saw him. Patrick crouched down, so he was at her level. "Hi, Bug," he said. That was his name for her. Always had been. She looked at him for a long moment. "Hi, Daddy," she said. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reunion. It was just a beginning, small and fragile, like the very first evidence of something that might grow. I watched them walk into the visitation room together, a supervisor following at a respectful distance, and I thought about all the ways this could still go wrong. I thought about them with the same weight I thought about the ways it could go right. I have learned over 63 years that loving someone doesn't mean you can fix them. It doesn't mean you can carry them. Sometimes loving someone means you set down what they handed you and let them pick it up themselves and decide whether to carry it or not. I drove Sloane to get coffee while we waited. We sat in a booth at the diner 2 blocks away, and she wrapped both hands around her mug and stared at nothing for a minute. "Do you think he'll do it?" she asked. "Really do it, not just for the evaluation?" "I don't know," I said. "I think the version of him that called me from the program on that 3rd call, I think that person is real. Whether he can keep finding that person when it gets hard, I can't promise you." She nodded. "I'm not asking you to promise. I just needed to ask someone who's known him longer than I have." "He was a good boy," I said, complicated. "Sensitive in ways he didn't always know what to do with. He's not a bad person. He made choices that put Ren in danger, and those choices were wrong. Both things are true." Sloane looked at me. "You're very honest about your own son." "I've had time to practice," I said. We sat there for a while and drank our coffee. It wasn't a comfortable silence, but it was an honest one. I've come to think that's more valuable. Ren came out of the visit 2 hours later carrying a drawing she and her father had made together. A house, a tree, a sun in the corner, the way children always put suns. She didn't say much in the car afterward, but when I tucked her in that night, she said, "He said he was sorry." "What did you say back?" I asked. "I said okay." She pulled her blanket up. "I don't know if that means I forgive him yet, but I said okay." "That's enough for now," I said okay. "Yeah," she said. "I think so too. It has been 4 months since that first visit. Patrick has not missed a single session. He completed his outpatient program and he's in a Thursday night support group that he describes as not as bad as I expected. He got a new job, something in logistics, steadier hours. He texted me a photo last week of the chip he got for 90 days. I looked at that photo for a long time. Ren is back at home with Sloane now. She still comes to my house on Saturdays, which started as a practical arrangement and has become something we both look forward to. We've graduated from jigsaw puzzles to a Saturday, cooking project. Last week we made biscuits from scratch, the kind that require folding the dough a specific way, and she took notes in a little spiral notebook she bought specifically for recipes. She is 8 years old and she takes notes. There's a moment I keep returning to. From that first night, after I got Ren out of the apartment and we were sitting on that low brick wall outside, before the police came, before Sloane came, before any of it was resolved, she looked up at me and said, "How did you know to come?" And I said, "You texted me." And she said, "But how did you know it was real?" I didn't have an answer for that in the moment. I've thought about it since. The honest answer is that I didn't know, not with certainty. I just moved. My body made a decision before my mind finished deliberating. And I've wondered whether that's what love actually is, when you strip away all the sentiment and the greeting card language. Not the feeling, not even the choice. The movement. The involuntary, unremarkable 3 seconds and then I'm already standing up response to someone you love needing you. I don't have my husband anymore to talk this through with. He would have had something good to say. He always did. But I think about what he would have said. And I think it would have been something like, "Of course you went. What else would you do?" And I think that's right. There wasn't another option. Not really. Not for me. I'm not telling this story because I think I'm a hero. I want to be clear about that. I drove 22 minutes and called a door and knocked on a door and picked up a child. I didn't do anything that required bravery in the traditional sense. What I did was show up, and I had the ability to show up, and I did. The harder part, the ongoing part, has been everything after. Sitting with Sloane while she decides whether to let Patrick back in. Watching Patrick decide every morning whether to keep going. Sitting with Ren while she figures out at 8 years old what it means that someone you love hurt you by accident and didn't mean to but did anyway. Those things take longer than 22 minutes. They take longer than 4 months. They might take years. I'm 63 and I have a bad knee and a house that gets quiet at night, and I will be here for all of them for as long as I am able to be. Last Saturday, Ren was sitting at my kitchen counter doing her homework while I started dinner. She had her math worksheet and her little notebook open beside it, and she was very focused. I was slicing onions, which I do badly because my eyes water immediately, and she looked up and said, "Grandma, why are you crying?" "Onions," I said. She considered this. "Is that actually why?" I looked at her, this 8-year-old with her father's eyes and her notebook full of recipes and her very old soul in her very small body. "Mostly," I said. She smiled and went back to her homework. I went back to the onions. Outside, the late afternoon light was doing that particular thing it does in spring where it comes through the window at a low angle and turns everything briefly gold. It lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then it was just regular light again. But for those 30 seconds, it was something. I've thought a lot about what it means to do the right thing when no one is watching, not the dramatic version, not the moment where you break down a door or carry a child to safety, the kind of moment that looks like courage from the outside. I mean the quieter version. The version that happens at a kitchen table at 4 in the morning, or in a booth at a diner over coffee that's gone lukewarm, or in a guest room doorway when you're watching an 8-year-old fall asleep for the first time without nightmares. That's where most of it actually happens. And nobody sees that part. What I keep coming back to is this: every single thing that led to Ren texting me that night was a consequence of choices. Patrick's choices, made one at a time over months, each one small enough to feel manageable in the moment and large enough to add up to something dangerous. The injury was real, the pain was real, but somewhere in there a series of decisions got made, and eventually those decisions left an 8-year-old girl alone in an apartment with a stranger at 10:30 at night, too scared to turn on a light. I don't say that to condemn my son. I say it because it's true, and because I think pretending it isn't true would be a disservice to Ren and to Patrick both. Consequences don't care about intentions. They just follow from actions, the way water follows from rain. The only thing that changes the outcome is changing what you do before the consequences arrive. And then there's Ren, what she did that night, quietly, in the dark, with a stranger down the hall. took a particular kind of intelligence that I don't think gets talked about enough. She assessed the situation. She identified who she trusted. She reached out in a way that wouldn't alert the person she was afraid of. She is 8 years old and she did all of that. That doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from a child who has been paying attention, who has been building a picture of the world and the people in it, and who understood at the critical moment that she was not without options. I think about what would have happened if I'd ignored that text. If I'd decided it was a wrong number and put my phone down and gone back to my TV show. The thought still catches in my throat. But here's what I've come to believe. The reason I didn't ignore it isn't because I'm a particularly exceptional person. It's because I had spent years showing up for Ren in small ways, and she had spent years learning that I could be counted on. Trust is not built in emergencies. It's built in every ordinary moment before the emergency happens. What we did that night, both of us, was only possible because of everything that came before it. Patrick is doing the work now. Slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. And I think the reason he is, really the reason underneath all the court requirements and the evaluations, is that he came face to face with what his choices had cost. Not in the abstract, not in the abstract, not in theory. He looked at his daughter's face in a supervised visitation room, and he understood it with his whole body. That understanding is painful. It is also, I think, the only thing that actually changes a person. Ren will carry what happened. She will carry it at 8, and at 18, and probably for the rest of her life in some form. But she will also carry this. She sent a text in the dark, and someone came. She asked for help, and it arrived. I hope that part stays with her too. I hope it becomes the louder memory, eventually. I can't guarantee how any of this ends. I can only tell you what I know to be true right now, in this moment, on a Saturday morning with the smell of biscuits in the kitchen and a little girl's handwriting on a notepad on my counter. Some things you cannot undo, but some things you can build carefully, one ordinary day at a time.